Recording now.
Okay.
I'm not an economist, and I don't do numbers. For a long time, we've had this phrase "trickle-down economy." I think it comes out of Chicago, and it gets mentioned quite a lot. Pope Francis recently said the following: "The promise was that when the glass was full, it would overflow, benefiting the poor. But what happens instead is that when the glass is full, it gets magically bigger. Nothing ever comes out for the poor." Now, you know more about economics. You understand this terminology.
Yeah, I do. Look, it's a very, very interesting dynamic, and I think a lot of what he says is actually absolutely right. There's no doubt about it. I mean, when I remember, I look back onto when I was in my 20s, and you looked at the Times 100 rich list, and you would have people who may be worth as much as £100 million. Now there are very few people in the Times 100 rich list that are worth less than £1 billion, and inflation hasn't really changed that much. What's happening is the rich are getting monumentally richer, and a huge amount of the world's wealth is now being gathered together with very small numbers of people. You know, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, all these kind of people who are making huge amounts of money out of new areas, but they're doing it out of the internet, and it's gathering together in these very tight areas. On a macro scale, people like Bill Gates are making the Bill Gates Foundation, so they are putting some money back into the community. But actually, on a slightly lower level, you are seeing, in some cases, quite an obscene accumulation of wealth in small places. As an economist, the one thing that you do look for is the amount of work that is created by those people who are creating wealth. So there are quite a large number of people. In fact, any SME, you have people who are going out who are possibly taking on second mortgages on their house, and they're trying to create businesses. Now, if they are successful, the reward for that is a certain amount of wealth, and what they give back to society is more jobs. They create more jobs in the economy. We've seen 2.2 million jobs created in the economy in the private sector over the last 5 years, and that's a very, very good thing. So the idea behind trickle-down economics is when it's functioning properly, you get people feel invigorated to go along and create new businesses. Those businesses become successful. As they get bigger and you have more wealth, and the businesses get better, more people are employed, and that's how the trickle-down effect works. And that's quite a good thing. And even those people who are business managers may well employ more gardeners or more decorators, or they buy more sofas that employs more people. And actually we saw an example of this in Wyre Forest, where rich people were buying boats, and they employed 350 people at Sea Line to make boats. When the economy wound down, that sort of rich, not rich, but it's that more luxury spending was then spent, was retracted from Sea Line, and we saw 350 people in Kidderminster lose their jobs when Sea Line closed down. So that's kind of how trickle-down economics works, but it's not perfect, and I think what Francis is saying, that for some people that glass is getting bigger, I think is absolutely right.
What would you say to Russell Brand, who, I don't know if you saw the clip of him standing outside and saying, so-and-so's on 4 million a year, that you must be really grafting in there, that's 300 times, 300 times what, I think his cleaner would have to work 300 years to earn what he earns in a year. What's your response to that?
I think there are a lot of people who have paid a huge amount of money, which is why I think Tony Blair's comment about being intensely relaxed at David Beckham and earning many millions of pounds is actually a pretty vile thing to say. I think that there are certainly people who will take risks and who will do very well, but I think at the end of the day, for example, when you have somebody who is drawing a salary from a company that is 150 times that of the lowest workers at the bottom end of the salary, I think there is something fundamentally wrong with that. But where you find the right balance, I think, is it's much more complicated.
If re-elected, what will you be fighting for on that issue?
That's a very good point. That's a very good question. I mean, certainly over the last 5 years, in my work on the Parliamentary Commission for Banking Standards, we have certainly been looking at the question of remuneration. I've done this with the Archbishop of Canterbury, as Justin Welby, who's part of that commission, and we've been looking exactly, how the salaries are, very high. Can people justify these high salaries? What can we do about it? So we have been looking at that. But at the end of the day, it's a difficult judgment to make between what you can turn around to people and say you can and can't pay your staff, and at what point the state starts overtaking people. And my my instinct is not to interfere as a sort of statist intervention with organisations, but is to set a better example. So perhaps the answer would be looking at some of the public sector salaries and make sure they look more reasonable in terms of how we do that, because we can determine what public sector salaries are, and try to use that to give guidance to private sectors in order to try and stop some of the more obscene excesses that we see.
And Jesus springs to mind, saying that it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. That is a spiritual comment. But do you see wealth as something that is always positive for someone, or would you actually say that being too wealthy can be damaging?
I don't think it makes you happy. I think the wealthier you are, the more problems you have to worry about. To be honest with you, I mean, I come across people who are very rich, and some of them complain to me about the level of school fees they're having to pay, and yet I would turn around to them and say, celebrate the fact that you can afford school fees. Somebody once came to me and sort of said their local Range Rover dealer had closed down, and where were they going to get their next Range Rover from? I have to confess I have absolutely zero sympathy for somebody who's struggling to work out where they're going to buy their next Range Rover from, notwithstanding the fact that Range Rover do employ a lot of people. I think I take the Mr. McCorber view. If you can live within your means and you have a little bit left over at the end of it, you are going to be a much happier person, no matter how much you're earning. Clearly you need enough money to be able to put food on your table, to put a roof over your head and put clothes on your back. That's very, very important. You need a little bit of money to bring up your family, to have the pastimes, the enjoyment you need. But do you really need to sell a 40-foot yacht to buy the 60-foot yacht? I mean, it's, at the end of the day...
Will it make you happy?
No, I don't think it does. I think it's superficial, if I'm being honest with you. As I say, I have lots of friends. It's no secret I was an investment banker and a hedge fund manager. I know lots of people who are very, very rich and very successful. Most are divorced. So, I don't think it makes you particularly happy.